Hi, I'm Kaytlyn,
And I'm Brianna.
and welcome to the Readers Clubhouse where we revisit our childhood favorite content. Brianna,
Kaytlyn.
we have quite an interesting hook question this week,
Uh-huh.
which I asked you about very briefly, and then I was like, wait, you have to save this for the podcast to
Yeah.
just share it. So, do you have a scary swimming story slash almost drowning story? The answer is apparently yes.
It is. I remember almost drowning a couple of times. As I
Well,
said
that's
before,
crazy to me. I don't remember this literally at all.
I mean, you were a baby,
Okay,
like
fair.
little, so
I also don't
um,
remember much
because
in
I mean,
general.
I'm 4.5 years older than you, so like that's a lot of time where I can get into shenanigans before you even remember them. So
How old were you with this first incident?
this isn't the first one, I don't think. I don't
Oh,
quite remember. I feel like there was one time in Texas. But again, it's very vague. Like I don't remember super well. The one time I do remember though is when we were living in that apartment complex before.
uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
it.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm talking
Uh-huh.
about. And there was a pool there and
Mhm.
everything. And there was me and I think some of my school friends also lived in that apartment or something. Because I remember another Brianna.
Oh,
Yeah, we were in the same class, I think, and she was also there and
okay.
stuff. And I don't remember exactly how it happened because again, trauma, so like your brain kind of like messes with
Yeah.
your memory. I just remember the only reason why I survived is because I was able to grab onto her and stuff and get back to the edge of
Wait.
the pool and everything.
You were saved
So,
by another Brianna?
yes, I was.
Oh. And
Yeah.
not even intentionally?
No, I don't remember. I don't think so and stuff. Like, I don't know. We were both like 7, 8, maybe 8,
Okay.
9 and stuff. So, I was a kid. We were both
Wow.
kids. It was just there was a lot of people at the pool, I think, and
Yeah.
stuff. And so I just remember that one distinctly. I do feel like it happened more than once though and stuff, but I
Mm.
don't remember all the details of the other one, unlike that one.
Whoa. Man.
Yeah.
I have
Fun times.
a memory of I don't know that I almost drowned, and I
Mm.
also am not fully confident this is actually a real memory.
I feel
I should
that.
probably ask Riley because I feel like she would know. So I'm pretty sure she was involved in it. But like I think in the same apartment complex or around there or something. Uh,
No, it wouldn't. It's not the same apartment complex then, if that's what you're thinking.
what do you mean?
The one before,
Yes,
that's the one.
that's the one you're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay, so maybe it was the one after.
after. Yeah, okay.
I have this very vague, foggy memory of like swimming into the deep end when I shouldn't have, and then having
Mm,
somebody have to come save me from it. I
yep.
don't know if that's a real memory. I it's not clear enough, and I've actually never asked Riley because I think about it occasionally and then I
Yeah.
forget.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
but my swimming story is I went to a river with some friends. I want to say sometime in college. I think, and it was on a summer break because it was in the area. It was a few hours away from where we currently live.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a couple of days of camping. There's a river camping by. I went with this friend and like her whole family, and you get into the river at one point, you float down it, you get out to the
Yeah.
river back at your campsite. So it's
Yeah.
it's kind of you
There's a
make
river near here that people do that with a lot.
yes, and it's pretty common thing to do in rivers,
Yeah.
anywhere you go. And there's one part of the river though that has a little bit of rapids, or not
Hmm.
rapids, but like little drops and things, and you have to kind of time it right and angle it right so that your floating device doesn't slip and you don't like fall. But I remember being slightly reckless, young and reckless, you know.
Yeah.
And then the tube I was on got caught, and I was under the part of the river that it wasn't as like a big waterfall. It was probably only
Yeah.
about 2 or 3, like, not even 2 or 3 feet. It might have been like 1 foot, foot and a half or something.
Mm.
And then, but being trapped where the water was hitting,
Yeah.
you know, over the
Yep,
waterfall.
yep.
This is not
Yeah.
a visual podcast, so that people can't see what I'm doing, but like over the waterfall where the
Yeah.
waterfall hits into the river slightly below it. And being trapped in there for it probably was only like 5 seconds or something, but
Yeah.
it felt like so long. And I was like, is this where I'm going to die? Like, is this
Hmm.
where it all ends?
Yep.
No, it wasn't where it all
Yeah.
ended. I ended up like getting out of it. I did lose a hat, and I might have been at that particular moment, and it might have been during the week. I don't remember, but I
Yeah.
love swimming. I love the water stuff. So those moments never made me not want to swim. I
Yeah.
remember going to like summer camps and stuff like that, and going to the lake was always my favorite part. You remember the blob?
Yeah, I remember the blob.
You seem like you didn't like the blob.
I don't like jumping off of heights.
Oh,
I
that's right. Yeah.
remember the camp that you were
Mhm.
thinking of probably and stuff,
Yep.
I was never fully a camper at it, so
Yeah.
I was always a leader when I was still doing that stuff. And one of the years I decided I kind of over the times I went multiple times was able to
Yeah.
get over some of not get over but at least try certain things. Like I did the inner tubes and stuff,
Oh, those are always
which
fun.
was a lot of fun. But I did the blob one time, but I just like couldn't land right and I
Yeah.
already didn't like falling and so I just felt so
Yeah.
embarrassed. I'm like I'm never doing this again. But this is a
Oh,
while after I had like uh just refused to do it anyway and
yeah.
stuff. So it like was not a fun time for
Yeah.
me and everything.
You did
Uh
it once and you're like,
I did
okay,
it
I've been you did it
twice. I
twice. Oh,
tried it
nice.
twice and I just could not land right and I just
Yeah.
like nah, I'm not gonna do this anymore.
You did your time.
I did.
Well
Yeah.
done.
I'd
I
rather go
was
in the inner tube.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that. My
Yeah.
favorite was when like a small child would be on the flying end and then a big adult would be coming over and they would just go flying. I
I
loved
think
watching that.
one time, I don't remember if you were there when this happened, but I don't think either of these two people are going to listen to this podcast.
Maybe
Uh,
you don't drop their names though, just in case.
so a certain friend of ours' younger brother, who's a bigger kid, yeah.
Okay, I'm picking up.
E, who is the sibling of the partner of the other person.
Okay.
So
Yes,
you
I'm
know what I'm
I'm
talking
picking
about.
up what's
Yeah,
happening.
okay.
Yeah.
So she was at the other end.
Uh-huh.
Jumps off, does
Mhm.
it. Obviously, she goes flying because she's like a toothpick
Yeah.
and stuff. And hits the water and has an immediately start having a nosebleed and stuff.
Oh,
Yeah. So
you know
Em
what's
felt so
funny
bad.
about that?
What?
Is I was at a birthday party with the sister with the
Oh, yep.
person one
Yeah.
time in I want to say middle school, and
Hmm.
we were on a bouncy castle and I was bouncing around like a psychopath, and I
Yeah,
kicked her
I
in the
can
face.
imagine. Of
I
course.
gave her a
Yeah.
bloody nose. I'm really
Yeah.
sorry about that. If you ever listen to this podcast person that we're talking about and realize that you're the
We're
one that we're
talking about
talking
you.
about,
Yeah.
um, I still feel bad about kicking you in the face and giving you a bloody nose. So
Their sibling would say you shouldn't feel bad, is what
I
would
know,
happen.
but I am a nice person and I feel bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, this long segment brought to you
Yeah.
by trauma. Anyway,
Trauma. Fun stuff.
sometimes when you regret saying something. Brianna,
Regret.
regrets. Okay. We're never gonna get, it's like be stuck under the waterfalls. We're never gonna get out of this segment. We are talking about a book, a favorite of ours, although the second one is more of your favorite than the first one, I believe.
Yeah.
Not the second one, but the next one.
Yeah. The one that follows this.
The one that follows. And is relevant because the main character in this book has a near-death experience in the ocean. And actually, we're talking about how trauma affects your memory.
Oh, yeah.
And she actually forgets her memories. Forgets her memories.
Yes.
She loses her memory for a brief amount of time.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about it? Give
The
us the book stats. Yeah.
What's book stats?
Book stats. Book stats.
It's
Book
that
stats.
time.
It's that
All
time
right.
again. Woo!
So,
That's
as you
wait,
know,
hold on.
we
That's gonna be our song segment right there.
Oh boy. Okay. So, as you guys know, we go over the book stats during this segment, just so you guys gonna kind of get an idea of what time of like when it was released, who it was released by, etc., etc. So to start us off, release year. It came out in 1991. I think this is the fourth one that he wrote. That sounds right, I feel like. So this one was preceded by, I believe, Redwall, Mossflower, and Madame Mayo, which is very interesting, because of the kind of like timeline that this is on. So, give you a little bit context. I'm not going to go into the details of the story, but giving you some context of the timeline of this, this book, the story that's being told is in between the time period that Martin the Warrior and Mossflower were like set, and between when Redwall and Madame Mayo are set. So those like four books, two on each end, kind of bookend the time period that this is. But there's an extent like a good amount of time between both of them from both ends and everything. So it's kind of like the middle of the timeline with this, which is very fascinating. We'll kind of go into more detail about that with some things later, but super interesting. Start of a new decade is when he released this. We know our old friend Brian Jacques. Whenever we're doing a Rebel book, that is going to be our author, man of many talents. And then our genre, fantasy fiction. There's not a ton of magic, mostly a lot of spiritualism and stuff. Like we have a spirit that visits people, and all that kind of stuff. And then our age range is like 8 to 14, so like middle grade. It can be kind of leaning towards young adult a little bit, but a little bit more middle grade and stuff. So those were our stats for Mariel of Redwall.
You know
Now
what's
we're gonna
funny,
head
Brianna?
into what?
Every time you say Brian Jacques, you say a man of many talents,
I
which
know.
cracks me up.
It's true though.
I mean, I totally agree with you, but are you gonna say it 22 times?
Watch me.
Uh, I will, literally, because we're
If
on
you
a video call.
guys, those of us that are, everybody that's listening, when we're done with this, send a message via one of our socials to see if I did do it every single time, because I want to know now. Because I'm not going to go back and double check myself.
You know who will, because they're editing it though? Moi.
Kaytlyn will.
All right, Brandon. Take
All
us
right.
into the overview. Cue
So,
ambient medieval music.
love that. I do have to share a grievance before we begin the overview.
A grievance. Okay, tell me.
It's towards you, Kaytlyn.
Towards me.
Yes.
Never mind. We're gonna skip this part.
Nope, we're gonna continue.
I'm
Do you
editing the
guys want to know?
podcast.
Do you know what's gonna happen? Do you know what happened, guys, before the podcast started? Kaytlyn looked at my overview and she tried to say I spelled things wrong, but this time I double checked things.
All right. First of
So
all,
she was wrong
first of
this
all,
time,
okay, Brianna, okay, one
Kaytlyn.
time. Also, the word that I was looking at is not a real word.
It's not a real word. Every other name that I've typed out also wasn't a real name.
I'm pretty sure you spelled someone's name wrong
I
in
spelled them
one of the
all
books.
wrong.
That's not a defense.
But this time I spelled it right, and you're like, this isn't right. And I'm like, no, that's
And
how it was spelled.
and what did I say? What did I
I,
say?
I don't even remember now.
Because you're too outraged to remember that I was like, oh no, you're right, Brianna. I was wrong. I admitted that I was wrong, and I
I was
didn't get
like, I was
defensive
pretty
about
sure
it.
that I double checked this time because I was tired of you being like, Brianna, that's spelled wrong. And I'm like, I'm just going off of vibes here. I can read it, you can read it. We know who we're talking about. That's what's happening.
But
But I didn't do that this time.
all right, just pat yourself on the back, I guess.
Doing that right now. All right, let's get into the overview. Woo!
Who said we should do a podcast together?
You did, and I did. And so it's a mutual decision.
Regrets.
Regards. All right, overview. Set many years after Martin the Warrior's time, but still before Redwall the book, we are introduced to a nefarious pirate rat king, Gabul the Wild.
A pie
He
rat king.
rules.
Sorry.
He rules his large fleet of pirate rats from the island of Fort Bladegirt. He has recently come into possession of a large and beautiful bell, taking and imprisoning its creator, Joseph, and Joseph's daughter, who Gabul had thrown into the sea in a fit of rage. The young mousemaid awakens on a sandy shore miles away with no memory and a large knotted rope wrapped around her neck. After almost being attacked by a group of toads, she is helped by a trio of hares of the Long Patrol, who help her find a guide to the Abbey of Redwall, where the renowned healers could help her get her memory back. Along the way, she runs into another lone hare who has a penchant for singing ditties. After arriving at the Abbey, the two are greeted by the residents and make fast friends with its denizens, namely a young mouse named Dandin, who is a descendant of the mouse thief Gauntf, an old friend that we know well from the book Mossflower. After the mousemaid, who had been calling herself Storm, is shocked into remembering her past, she quickly remembers her father and her real name, Mariel. She makes a pact to set off and save her father and kill Gabool. Dandin, Tarquin the hare, and a young hedgehog named Dury join her on this quest, and they set out, following an old poem left by a traveler seasons ago. During Mariel's journey to Redwall, many things had happened in other parts of the setting. Gabool's second-in-command steals a vessel from Gabool and is chased by the other rat captains until the crew runs aground in Mossflower and begins an assault on Redwall. And on the distant mountain of Salamandastron, Lord Roanblade has strange dreams about what is to come, which causes him to set off on his own to stop Gabool and claim the bell that he had commissioned from Joseph. As our small band of travelers are able to finally make it out to sea and find a vessel, they are attacked and separated. Dandin and Dury are taken captive by a crew of rat pirates, and Tarquin and Mariel are saved from the ocean by Lord Roanblade, who had commandeered a vessel of his own to get to Gabool. There we go. Converging on Fort Blakegirt, Dandin and Dury are freed from their chains by Joseph, who had escaped earlier, and are soon reunited with Mariel and Tarquin. Joseph's small army of those who were made slaves by Gabool are ready to take the fort with their help, and everything comes to a head when they corner Gabool in his dungeon, where he keeps a creature that ends up being his downfall. After it is all done, they all set back out for Redwall, which itself has been saved saved from the rats by the trio of hares that helped Mariel before. As Mariel and her companions make it back to Redwall, they are greeted by their friends and loved ones, and once again, all is well in Mossflower Woods.
Well done.
Thank you.
I have a grievance.
Okay.
His name is not Roanblade.
What is it?
It's Ronblade.
Ronblade.
You misspelled it!
That was because I misremembered it this time. I don't think that is not vindication for... No.
Yes, it is.
Sure. Okay.
I was right.
So...
I was right. You were wrong. You got something wrong in here. Yeah. Woo.
Sure. Okay, moving on.
Brianna,
right.
Well done. That was good.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Question mark?
Why is the question mark?
Because question mark?
That just saying because question mark
is not grievance to me after.
Exactly. It's just bookended by grievances.
Okay.
It's like being a sibling.
That is true, actually. Very, very true. All right. Kaytlyn, take it away.
Okay. Songs and poems.
Songs and poems.
We're gathered here today, dearly beloved, to speak about the songs and poetry in...
Is there somebody else here with us that I am not aware of?
Always, Brianna.
Okay.
Should I go on?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of songs and poems in Redwall. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Because they are kind of important. Specifically in this book, we love a musical creature, and we have Tarquin, who is a musical hare, and he is just very funny. He makes a lot of ditties. He's deeply in love with Han Rosie, who is another hare from what's it called?
Salamandastron. Yeah.
And it's just very funny with him because he often spends a lot of time writing these little ditties and these little essentially love songs to her that she just will never hear. Although, I mean, she kind of does hear them eventually because spoiler alert. But yeah, so I don't know. There's a lot of songs and poetry. I guess one of the more important things is often in Brian Jacques' books, he has some sort of riddle or some sort of
Yeah.
poem that guides the heroes. And in this one, he does have that. There's a character named Saxtus. Saxtus and Dandon are besties, and they are both, I believe, orphaned mice who live at the Abbey. And they study together, they're in lessons. Dannon is a bit more of the outgoing, rambunctious type. Saxtus is a bit more of the reflective. He's still outgoing. He gets into trouble sometimes too, but he's a bit more
Hmm.
reflective and is a lot better at remembering things like facts. So he happens to have memorized this poem for some reason, and he recites it to his friends, and they're like, "Dude, that's a weird poem, nerd." It's just really funny. It's classic. Yeah, so just this poem that he memorizes and reads, and it has some really key things for the plot, which is both past and future things for the plot.
Yeah.
Um yeah. So I guess that's kind of all I have to say. I don't necessarily want to read the poem just because
Well,
yeah.
so the poem that he says is the poem that triggers Mariel's memory,
Yes, I was
but it's
going to get to
not
that.
this. Oh, okay, because you said it seemed like you were about to finish out this section, so that's why I
That's
was
okay.
okay.
You can keep going.
Uh, yeah. So the poem that Saxus recites is the one that triggers Mariel's memory, but the poem that's actually the big focus throughout the book
Mhm.
is a poem that it is mentioned in the overview and stuff. Luckily, because I don't always include all those little bits in it and stuff. But it that poem was written by a traveler who had been to Fort Bladegirt or the island that it was on, and
Terrible.
how they could get to from Redwall to that island and
Right.
stuff. So it was very interesting, like how they spent all that time like trying to figure it out and stuff. And some of it was figured out while they were at Redwall, but then
Mhm.
they had to do it some on the way because you can't figure out certain things unless you can see it and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
There's it's one of the things that I think one of our listeners commented on actually is the question of who's writing down all of these things, who's writing down all these prophecies, who's writing down all these
Mm,
directions to places, and right answers the question a bit in this book. The person who wrote down the directions to Bladegirt was a traveler who had traveled
yeah.
there and back and then stopped by the Abbey. But this poem that Saxtus recites, he just sort of stumbled upon it and was like, "Oh, that's an interesting poem. Why don't I just remember that for no reason?"
Yeah.
And keep. It says he found it on a scroll in the gatehouse
Yeah.
some seasons ago. I'm not sure what it means, but I like the words. Like, what a nerd! What a nerd, Saxtus. I love the guy. Love the guy, but what a nerd. Um, yeah. So you got the poem that activates the memories. Because it's as you were right. I was actually going to combine those two things, and I was wrong to do that. They are two
Mm,
separate poems. Um, the one he recites is the one that is about Mariel's past, and specifically speaking about the bell. The bell is a main feature in this book. It's talking a lot about it's what Brian does really well with inanimate objects being a character. The bell is in a interesting way its own character in the book. And
yeah,
so
absolutely.
um poem, while being about um the island and being about um Mariel and her father, is also a little bit about the bell because it says, "You whom they seek, though you do not speak, the legend is yet to be born. One day you will sing over stones that are red in the misty summer dawn," which
Mm,
sounds way better in a British accent. Just gonna say it. So the bell kind of becomes the central thing. It's the reason Gabul took Joseph and his daughter because Joseph made the bell for Ron
yep.
Blade. Um, and then the bell becomes this haunting character for Gabul
Yeah.
um, throughout the time. So yeah, the songs and poetry, again, we've said this I think probably every time. It's the audiobooks do a really good job. We actually made a
They do.
comment on this. I think when we were texting that the audio production
Mm.
seemed a little bit better in this one. And
That's yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
so definitely, obviously, we recommend all of them. We recommend all the listening to the audiobooks of everything that they have.
Yeah.
But in particular, this one had songs that were really well produced, and it was,
Yeah.
it's one of those things you wish you could get like the soundtrack. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I was thinking the same thing because there were some songs that popped up. I don't remember if it was this one. I feel like it was, but like some of the more recent ones I listened to, I'm like, I wish there was a like a soundtrack or
Yeah,
whatever, because whoever did it and then like did the backing and music and everything to it, like did such a good job and
yeah,
stuff, and it just kind of really like I don't know, add to the flavor of everything. It was really
yeah.
nice.
It's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
So listen to the audiobooks.
Yes.
Shall we move into world building slash story?
Yes.
All right. It's starts off actually not in Mossflower Wood. It starts off on Terramore Isle. This
Yeah.
is an island off, is it the east? Which direction are we? Northeast, southwest. It's an island off of the west coast. It's sort of north and west of Salamandastron, far enough away that it takes several days to get there. Yeah, I mean it's an island. It has one building on it, and then tunnels underneath where the escaped slaves make their home.
Yeah.
And then you also have this classic Redwall Abbey. You have Salamandastron, both places that we get to witness, get to go into more things. Uh, we talked in, I want to say Martin, about the secret badger cave that was shown to Martin, where there's all these like messages, or not messages, but like these
Oh,
pictures
on the mountain.
on the
Yeah.
mountain. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
believe Ron Blade actually goes into that cave in this book, doesn't he?
He might. He does talk about his visions, though. Even if he
Yeah.
doesn't go into the cave, it's definitely like we see a little bit more of the Badger's like mystic sight
Yeah.
sort of thing, but also we do get we get like a I'm trying to remember during the course of the books that we've gone over so far. I remember the one in Mossflower,
Mhm.
whichever lord that was. I'm forgetting
Let's
now.
spell his father's Boar.
Boar. Okay.
Mhm.
Boar went what's it called when they go berserk?
Yeah, the Blood Wrath.
Blood Wrath. Okay. So I remember he had the Blood Wrath. I
Mhm.
don't remember if like Orlando didn't, I don't think.
No,
Yeah,
no, I don't think he did. I mean,
yeah.
Martin actually had a bit of the Blood Wrath, in Martin the
Yes,
Warrior.
yeah. Yeah. It's just very rare for
Yeah,
somebody other than a badger in this
yeah,
case and stuff. So with Ron Blade in this, we do get to see a little bit more of that.
mhm,
He actually has a better control than some of the other Badgers we'll see eventually, but also he get kind of like shoved out of it a couple of
mhm.
times because of circumstances that we're having.
Yeah,
So it's very interesting because we're getting this like character who's like seeing things like important things and stuff. He's not
yeah,
just going crazy or anything, but like also he again very much like I'm getting in my rage and
mhm.
stuff. So
And
yeah.
I believe one of the hares said that he had some of the strongest Blood Wrath
Oh, that's right. I
in a
forgot about
while.
that.
So it's
Yeah.
he did have a little bit better control of it, but he also had it a lot stronger, and it happened a lot more often. And it also is the reason his Blood Wrath is the reason why he ends up going onto the boat and like killing all the rats, and then like
Yeah.
that whole scene.
He steals the
So
ship. Yeah.
yeah, you also get to there's this swamp land, like marshland, that
Yeah.
appears actually in quite a few books, just because a marsh is a really great way to lose like a group of people,
So true.
basically. Yeah, that's kind of the big ones is Terramort, Mossflower, Wood. You get Redwall, and then you get Salamandastron. You run into some
Yeah.
toads, you run into some newts, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. Typical bad guys.
typical bad guys. Typical bad guys also being rats. These ones are sea
Yeah.
rats, and they're pretty typical pirates.
Yeah.
Pirates.
Oh my gosh.
I'm so
You're never
afraid
gonna
of
let
that.
that go, are you?
I will never. Um, and yeah, so pretty standard like good versus evil characters.
Yeah.
Um,
As per usual.
badgers, mice, squirrels, otters, hares, hedgehogs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The good guys. More sea rats than anything. I
Yeah.
don't remember there being a lot of like weasels or ferrets or
They
whatever.
never, as far as I remember, and I think I remember thinking about this at some point, I don't remember there ever being a side character or anything mentioned of besides being a rat
Yeah.
in the vermin section of this and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Shall we move on to characters?
Yeah. Did you have any comments on the story at all, or?
I mean, I don't know that I don't know. Did I? Do you? Do you have comments on the story?
I guess so. I'm actually, as we are recording this, in the middle of listening to Bellmaker, and
Hmm.
some of my story comments actually are going to tie more into Bellmaker, so I'll have to hold off on some of that
Okay.
until we get to that recording and everything, because these you all will learn about this as we do our next episode, but the Bellmaker is about mostly the same characters from this, but doing a different adventure
Yeah.
and kind of what that involves. And it's funny, the kind of like setting for that is very different from this one in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but not at the same time.
Yeah.
So, it's just this is our first, I guess this does tie into the character thing. This is our first female protagonist
Yes.
who is like, nope. Dandon's the one that holds the sword, but Mariel's the one. I was gonna say holds the pants in the
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah.
and stuff, because she's the one that like runs things whenever they're doing stuff for the
Mhm.
most part. When it's just like
She's
her and the crew
she's
in
the
their
main
little group.
protagonist.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean the book is literally named after her. So,
yes, yes, yes,
you know. Yeah, so I guess story-wise, I guess if we want to sit and focus on story a bit, um just some interesting facts. Or just I guess some interesting thoughts that I had.
hmm.
Um Definitely about her being the first main female protagonist. And of course,
Yeah,
this is the fourth book that he wrote. So
yeah,
one of the things that we both have talked about Brian doing relatively well is writing female main characters, and
yeah,
he writes them pretty balanced and pretty nuanced, I guess. They're not all the
yeah,
same type. They're different archetypes, and I appreciate that he did that.
yeah.
I think story-wise it is pretty it's a standard like adventure. Um
Standard hero's journey too,
yeah,
kind of a thing. Yeah,
yeah. I think some things that I thought were really interesting is the way that you deal with like trauma,
yeah.
traumatic brain injury. Um, another, the thing is the world building, story, and characters all sort of
Tie together.
tie together because,
Yeah,
So one of the things I also think Brian does sometimes really well, is talk about characters with disabilities and the way that generally the disability doesn't necessarily make them less than or less important or whatever. And here
yeah.
we have Simeon, who's blind,
Mm,
and his blindness isn't actually like obviously he's disabled in that he can't use his eyes, he can't see,
yeah.
but he's incredibly intelligent and he's also very observant of
Mm-hmm.
things. And I think it's a pretty standard thing for a blind person to then have enhanced senses in other ways. That's
Yeah,
standard like storytelling sort of plot device. But I think I appreciated that he's not only blind, he's also older. He's an
yeah.
older mouse, and yet he's still critical to the story and
Mm,
crucial to a lot of characters in a lot of ways and a lot of interactions.
yeah,
Um, I also love the way that rather than the blind having to be taught things or to be like helped along or led along or whatever, that often he's the one teaching other people things. And not only is it pay more attention to your surroundings, because
mm,
just because you can see doesn't mean you don't have to pay attention to the things you hear or the things you smell
yeah,
or that kind of stuff.
yeah,
But I also just like that he's got depth of wisdom to him. As he's an older character, so of course he
yeah.
does.
He has a lot of experience.
Yeah, he's got a lot of experience, and I think he's an standard mentor in a hero's journey. He's the one that sort of advises and leads things on. I also love that
Yeah,
he's often the one visited by Martin in this book, that he's the one that Martin kind of invests some spiritual time in.
yeah,
I just think that Simeon's good anchor part of the story. I think I also love that there's a lot of adventure. There's a lot of friendship and a lot of, I would do anything for my companions. I'd do anything for my friends.
yeah,
Sometimes it's that they're going to do anything for me, even if I don't want them to. And I think that's really great because sometimes, people can be really stubborn and sometimes it's really hard to ask for help. Like
yeah,
totally relate to that. Sometimes it's hard for me to be like, actually, I need some help here. Um, and I think seeing the way that Dandon, Dury, and Tarquin, who
hmm,
are Dandon and Dury have never left Redwall Abbey.
No.
Dandon is a descendant of Gonf. He has lived in Mossflower Woods and lived at Redwall Abbey for most of his life, if not all of his life. Dury is the son of the cellar, or not son, nephew of the cellar hog, and spent like he loves his uncle so much, and it's really adorable.
He quotes his uncle quite often.
Yeah, it's in the way that like,
My
oh,
uncle said.
it's in the way that characters will be like, my grandma once said,
Mhm.
it's this ancient family member that has a lot of wisdom,
Wisdom.
question
Yeah.
mark, because some of the things
It
are
is
not wisdom.
some of it, it's one of those ones where the character attributes any smart thing to their
Hmm.
older relative, who is a very intelligent character. It's just they put them a little bit too much on a pedestal. And his uncle doesn't, you don't see his uncle that often enough. Like, obviously you see it in some of the Redwall Flash is the stuff that's going on and everything and stuff
Vignettes.
and vignettes, and you see the his uncle, and like he is a very competent person, but he's not quite that wise as much as Dury puts him up to
Yeah.
be and everything.
Yeah.
So it's just really funny seeing him being like, my old uncle said, kind of
Yep.
a thing
Yep.
and stuff. Yeah.
It's also one of the things I love about Redwall is how deeply entrenched in community all these characters are.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
actually, one of the things I did write is, or one of the notes that I took was talking about how they have it's the importance of family. And let me
Yeah.
see what I did on page. I wrote a page number down for some reason. Yes. Okay. So it's Abbot Bernard. Sorry,
Yeah.
Bernard. I forget the way that the British say Bernard. It's not Bernard, it's Bernard.
Bernard.
And I have to remember that. So it's talking about how, oh, so Simeon says, like, you're just the type of mouse that Redwall needs. He's talking to Dandon. He says something about how Dandon could be the next abbot, and then Bernard is like, "Oh, no abbotship for you, eh, young Rip? It's easy to see that you come from the line of Gonf the Mouse Thief. I wish that Martin the Warrior had left ancestors behind." Which, funny, it's not ancestors, descendants.
Mm.
Not to,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Fascinating.
not to fact check.
Typos.
Typo. And then Simeon said, maybe he did, my friend. Not direct descendants, but spiritual ones. Martin was a warrior and founder of Redwall. His presence is all around us in these very stones. I've never talked with a creature whom I felt was actually touched by Martin's spirit, but then we've never needed such a one in this time of peace. However, I feel that one day before my seasons have run, I will meet some creature whose life has been touched by the shadow of our warrior.
Mm.
And I think it's that discussion about gone left blood descendants. Dannon is
Yeah.
one of his descendants. Martin didn't leave any descendants, but the story of Redwall across all of the books is about the spiritual descendants of Martin and about how
Yeah.
Martin every generation or obviously every book that's written, there's a
Yes.
creature that is touched by Martin's presence in some way, and they're the hero, the chosen one, however you want to say
Yeah.
that. um and there's the spiritual descendant, which is just as important as the blood descendant.
Hmm.
And I like that Redwall tends to do both and
Hmm.
and leans into that quite a lot. Also talking about blood family is really important. So you look at again Dury and his uncle, that is blood
Yeah.
family. They're very close. They love each other. But the thing about Redwall Abbey is it's always about family. And
Yeah.
even though they're all different creatures, they're different species, they're different jobs, they do different things. They are all together under one banner, Redwall
Yeah.
Abbey. And the idea is that they're there for peace and they're there to help people around them. They're there to provide a sense of refuge and safety in the middle of Mossflower Wood. They're also a place of refuge for travelers who are coming
Hmm.
in and out.
Yeah.
So I really like it.
Like I was gonna mention Dandon and Saxtus. It
Mhm.
gets mentioned quite often in both this book and the next book with them in it. Like they consider each other brothers. They
Mhm.
grew up together. They're super close. And the community that they found there, it's essentially like found family and
Yeah.
stuff because like they're not related actually by
Yeah.
blood. And we have again, and we see this in I think almost every book.
Mhm.
Again, we'll see what happens. But having a mother badger,
Mhm.
like badger mom of Redwall, who is like just a collective adoptive mother of like all
Yeah.
the, as they call them, Dibbins
Ugh,
in the
so
books.
cute.
So like the little infants of the Abbey all are generally raised in a communal way by everybody, but largely they're watched over by this like large badger
Mhm.
woman and stuff. So it's
And
just kind of like cool. The community aspect of that is something I've always loved about these books, and I still enjoy that part of it a lot,
yeah.
actually.
And it's one of the things I noticed particularly in this book, is you have the father abbot and
Yeah,
then you have the mother badger, like the badger
yeah,
mom, and you've got these kind of two archetypes of a paternal figure who guides and leads and helps in different areas, and you have the maternal figure who also guides and leads and helps in other areas, and they're in unison, they're working together to
yeah,
care for all these different people who are very different. Um, and I think it's a really beautiful picture of found family. I also
yeah.
love that in other books you have a mother abbess, and there's
Hmm.
he Brian generally has some sort of maternal figure, some sort of paternal figure.
Yeah,
Even if it's not like a father abbot, mother abbess, like badger mom, whatever. There's no badger dad, which I find very interesting.
it is
Um,
very interesting.
but there is still a bit of the, stereotypes of the 90 like 80s, 90s
I
in.
feel like the closest we got was with Orlando.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yes. He
yeah,
was a badger dad.
yeah.
Because he just lived at the Abbey and oh, Brianna, that's so cute. I love that. Oh,
Thank you.
all right. Um, yeah, and I think we talked about how this is actually one of the more nostalgic books for us. I
Yeah,
don't want to, maybe I should wait and save that for when we talk about why it's nostalgic. But um characters, Brianna.
characters. So this time around, mine is kind of like a trio of characters. In
Hmm.
this case, are three hares that we meet, that Storm slash Mariel meets and save, it gets saved from the toads and stuff. They are from the mountain Salamandastron, all that kind of stuff. So a little bit later in the book, like I mentioned in the overview, they there was like a group of rats that was from the island of Terramore and everything, but they were like trying to strike out on their own. And I think his name was Gray Stripe or
Great
something.
patch.
Gray Patch, I was close. So
Close.
Gray Patch was like, I don't want to deal with Kabul anymore. Peace out. Tries to take off. It's run aground more or less, and then just
Hmm.
keeps making terrible decisions the further along he goes, and ends up going to Redwall. Well, Ron Blade tells Clary and the other two, I need you to follow what's up with these people and like help out anybody that needs help. So they end up at Redwall right after the Redwall gets like surrounded essentially and everything. And this listening to this whole section and
Hmm.
everything, it's so funny because we've had a couple of last stands already in this, but
Yeah.
this was different. Like
Yeah.
it this one was different. And I think this is why I've always loved the hares and the badgers the most
Hmm.
is these moments because they went into it. Literally there's like a part I remember where Clary and Time and Rosie were like they were like distracted because they knew what they were doing,
Hmm.
which was they were going to die.
Hmm.
Because that was the only way they could save some slaves that these people had had and everything. And they didn't have enough manpower to do what they needed to do and get out of there alive and stuff. And so we just see these three doing what hares do, which is like laugh in the face of death basically every single time they go up against. Like that's a lot of the hares who are the ones from Salamandastron. There's some that like
Hmm.
there's like a variety. Like Tarquin, honestly, yes, he's from Salamandastron. He actually do figure out during the course of the story he was sent away because he gets a little too distracted by
Hmm.
Han Rosie and the fact that he's just kind of exuberant and stuff. So he's a good fighter, all that kind of stuff. But like just the mindset that those three had going in there, I was like, we're gonna do right by our ruler. We're gonna do right by these people and we are going to protect everybody at the cost of our life. And you find out at the end, you think all of them are dead. And then Han Rosie essentially limps out of there and is like saved at the last second, I think, by one of the squirrels and stuff or something like that. So I don't know. I just really liked. I feel like this was the first time actually that we got to see in our rereading of this and stuff that we got to see the heart of what being a Hare of Salamandastron was.
Yeah.
And like it's their whole part like point of being there isn't to like be a military that's like ruling over anything. They're like a group of protectors that's there like the front lines against in this case pirate pirates and stuff. So like their whole thing is keeping the threats from the ocean, more or less, from crossing into Mossflower or like other territories and stuff. So they're the rulers of Solomon Dastron and the Hares are not about trying to like use their power over other people.
Mhm.
It is basically like we are the like line of defense. We are not letting anybody pass, all that kind of a thing. And so it's something I always enjoyed about them. And so like getting to see our trio of hares do all of this, it was freaking sad. I did feel a little bit like emotional listening to that, and I hadn't felt like that honestly, except for the end of Matameo wildly enough since I've been listening to all of them
Right.
and everything. So it just was a little bit like, oh, interesting, like getting that feel from that. So it's kind of a three for one
Yeah.
favorite character, those three all together. Han Rosie, love that girl. She's got the weirdest laugh,
Yeah.
and bless the lady that they had playing her in the audiobook because she did such a good job. It was wild.
Yeah.
It was like I could see why people got annoyed a little bit in the story and everything because she could not hold it in and
Yeah.
stuff. So she is wild. She's like great. I love it because you'll get to see more of her actually in Bellmaker. She has even a bigger, I feel like, character bit in this, but I there's some things we'll see more of. Like I might be a little bit wrong of that, but we'll see what happens. Yeah.
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 I mean, I agree with you. I think those three are particularly, I don't know, I just like particularly good characters. I think
Yeah.
the thing about the thing that Brian does really well in a couple of the books, and some of them are in books we haven't read yet,
Yeah.
is he really makes you love these characters and
Yes.
deeply care about them. It's in their honor, it's
Yeah.
in the way that they love each other and the way that they love other people,
Yeah.
especially when it's the hares that are the ones making these last stands. Um
Yeah.
you know that everything that they're doing is in order to protect the weak and those who can't protect themselves.
Yeah.
And you said you got a little bit emotional. I was so emotional when plot, like, spoiler alert, they died
Yeah.
at the end. And it's the moment there's well, of course
I was gonna say, I almost forgot while you were looking for that. There's a line that happens between the squirrel maiden named Tree
Mhm.
Rose and Han Rosie, and I forget exactly why it started, but basically it's like Tree Rose had to like help the slaves escape and everything, and Han Rosie literally like told her, like, yeah, I'll see you back at the Abbey. But at that point, her and Clary and Time had already made this decision, like, we're not coming back from this and everything. So Han Rosie lied to Tree Rose to keep her spirits up and everything. And that was a really like big moment with that is like I remember Tree Rose's character literally is like she lied, like she just was like devastated and all of that.
Yeah. So it's Roof, Tom, and Tree Rose, who I believe are the three squirrels.
Yes.
Um, shake hands with the three hares, and then Tree Rose waves, "Goodbye, Rosie. See you back at the Abbey." Rosie
Mm,
nodded. "Of course you will, pretty one. On your way now." Um, and then she says later, "I say, Clary, is it all right if I laugh and hoot a bit once the show gets underway?"
mm,
"Permission granted, Rosie, old gal. You chuckle as much as you like." And yeah, it's just this absolute carnage. And um Clary says something, "Famous last stand, what? Go out in a blaze of glory and all that. Right, chaps, another quick volley and give them a shot to let them know we've arrived. Fire." And it's the way that he is writing these things. So it's Time was kneeling, wounded in both foot paws. He bravely held his bow
mm,
horizontally, firing as rapidly as his dwindling quiver of arrows permitted. Rosie flinched, the sword caught her high on the cheek. Clary is shouting, and the very last line of that is accompanied by an old squirrel. The long patrol threw themselves into the howling
mm,
mob of sea rats.
yeah.
All the slaves end up back into the safety of the abbey, and then it's I'm getting emotional again. Kaytlyn. Tree Rose and Oak Tom were crying. Even the normally
Yeah.
tough Roof Brush broke down and wept bitterly as they related what they had seen at the magnificent last stand of the Long Patrol.
Yeah.
They didn't stand a chance. If they came through the center of that sea rat camp, laughing and joking, they were completely surrounded. Ugh. It's so good. Oakton was pale, his voice low and trembling. I never thought that was what they meant to do, but it was the only thing they could have done to free the slaves. What makes it also strange is that they knew what would happen, how it must end.
Mm,
Trio's, oh, they were so brave. Rosie smiled at me and said she'd see me back here. Oh, Father Abbot, why did they do it?
yeah.
Bernard shook his head gently. Who knows, child? Who knows? Certainly none of us at Redwall. We are infants in the way of war. Colonel Clary and his heirs were complete warriors. Their seasons were numbered from birth, and they knew this was the day their fates were sealed.
Yeah.
Saxtus hung his head. Yet they knew they were helping Redwall and bringing liberty to the slaves. So they went to meet their destinies, smiling and joking. I was
Hmm.
wrong about the hares, and I'll always remember that when I make judgments about other creatures. Yeah, and then Flag and Melis go off into the woods,
Oh,
and
that's
Rosie
right.
can
Yeah.
help. And that's how they Flag and Melis are the ones who find Rosie and rescue her and bring her back.
Yeah.
It's just the thing that Brian does, and we'll talk about this in a few other books that have particularly like just devastating
Yeah.
endings. Because I remember when Rose died,
When we get to Krega Saga, like
dude, the Long Patrol, which is the book that
it
she first,
starts.
yeah, that
Yeah.
starts it.
Mm.
There's
Guys, I can't wait till we get
yeah,
to that part.
I
Yeah.
can't either. We talked about the Krega era being our favorite.
Yeah.
I think those three characters, I think it's good that we talked about those three because they're
Yeah.
important to the story. Even though they're side characters. They're not main
Yeah.
characters.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're main side characters, I guess.
Yeah. They're
Um,
very important side
yeah.
characters.
I do really like Mariel. I do really like
Yes.
Dandon.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Joseph is a phenomenal character.
He is. Yeah.
Which we'll talk a bit
He's like
more.
he's like this beefy mouse like artist basically.
Yeah,
He like works with metal so it makes kind of sense
yeah.
and stuff, but like it's just funny the way they always describe him
Hmm.
because it's so different from like the other times they've described warrior mice and
Hmm.
stuff. Like the anytime like even adult Matthias when they've described him has not been like they've described Joseph and stuff. It's just like
It's it reminds me of in Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? You have Uncle Iroh, who's
oh
like just this jolly old fella, and he's just kind
yeah.
of round and soft and good. And then he goes to jail, and then
Yeah.
you're just like, oh, he's still round and soft or whatever. And then he comes out, and he's just ripped, and it's
Yeah.
like, you were like 80 years old.
Yeah.
You should not be that ripped.
He was
Um,
so ripped by the end.
is a bit how like I feel about Joseph. Is it's just like why are you so buff? You're like an older, like mid
Yeah.
40s gentleman. And I mean, it's not old by any means, but it's
No.
just it.
I'd say it might be early 50s even,
Yeah,
depending.
it
Yeah.
depends on like age and mice and all that
Honestly,
kind of
yeah.
stuff.
It's
But
hard to tell with the
yeah,
creatures in these books.
they don't give you an age of seasons essentially.
And they measure it by seasons, and you're like, is that a full like summer, winter, fall, spring kind of a thing? Or is it literally you count the four individual seasons and that's each a chunk of time kind of a
Like,
thing? So
does
they
each season represent a year? Is that what we're talking about? Ugh, the
that's the
questions that we
thing.
have.
We that's never really answered, honestly.
No, I'm sure someone on the internet has thought about it though. We could probably
Probably, yeah.
find it.
Yeah.
Um, okay, now it's time to go into our nostalgia rating. Brianna,
Yes.
everybody give
Yeah.
a drum roll. Go.
I'm gonna give this a four. Yeah, I'm gonna give this a four. It honestly, man, I'm having a hard time putting my thoughts. I am in the middle of reading Bellmaker,
Hmm.
and literally it's this, and that's the
Hmm.
sequel in this like timeline. So like it's hard for me to detach some of my like thoughts and feelings from
Yeah.
where I'm at currently with that. So like I apologize for that, guys. But that's just the way that it is in the
Yeah.
series, some of the time. And I I mean, I'm notoriously a higher rater anyway with most things, so that's always how it's gonna be.
Hmm.
But yeah, I feel like the funny thing is like this is nostalgic for me, but I honestly read Bellmaker more than I
Yeah.
did this one. I think this is one of those times, this has happened to me multiple times as I've gotten like grown up and even
Yeah.
as an adult now, where I've read technically like a sequel first.
Yeah.
And I think this case, it was that I read The Bellmaker before I read Mariel. And so there's some context when I originally read this that I didn't have when I was going into The Bellmaker that I now have doing this and all that kind of
Yeah.
thing and stuff. So it's very interesting rereading this and getting like honestly a better adult context with this or like at
Yeah.
least it's not even adult, it's like me as my who I am now, a context with
Yeah.
interacting with this text and stuff. And so I've really enjoyed that aspect of this. I love Mariel. I'm very interested to see as we get further along the series, though, how she holds up compared to some of the other female warriors that we're going to be running into. Obviously, we've had female warriors like Han Rosie is a warrior, like we have other stuff, but it's more like who the ones who are kind of a little bit more of our protagonists
Right.
and stuff. So I'm going to be very interested to see how that kind of plays out. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4 because I enjoyed the journey. I enjoyed the characters, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I also give it a 4, maybe even a
Mm,
4.5.
yeah.
Um, Definitely there are a few other books who are more nostalgic for me, and we'll get
Yeah.
to those. I think
Yeah.
all of them are in Krega's series, just or
Yeah,
Krega's era,
honestly, I
actually, no.
think we're gonna be once we get to that part, which will be a little while, we'll be
Yeah,
hitting banger after banger of
I'm just
like
gonna cry. That's what we're gonna do.
emotions. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'll give it a 4
Mm.
because I know there's some others coming
Oh my
soon.
gosh, we
But
agreed on something
I
this time.
know that's crazy. But I think part of it, I'm sure that I either read Bellmaker first or I don't remember.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. But one of the things I just that is so nostalgic for me is Mariel and just having that female protagonist, having that strong female character who's a warrior and who can take care of things. She is the one that is, even though Dandon is sort of the spiritual descendant of Martin in that he's the one wielding Martin's sword. It is
Hmm.
Mariel that who is the main character, and it is Mariel
Yes.
who's the kind of hero that drives the story forward.
Yeah.
And I really, really love that in this book. There's at the beginning when they meet Mariel when she's going by Storm.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of like, oh, she's a young mouse maid, and there's the two mice, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, we're gonna show off. We're young men, we have to show off for
Yeah.
this female mouse. But over time, you get to see them as these just really, really good friends, and
Yeah.
I love that because we don't often get a lot of really strong male-female friendships that are just platonic, not romantic. And
Yeah.
Brian actually, probably is one of the reasons I love him so much, is that he
Mm.
does a lot of really strong platonic friendships between
Yeah.
um male and female characters, even with like Han Rosie and the two guys that she travels with.
Yeah.
It's two guys and her. And
Yeah.
it is a trio of friends. And yes, there's an order of hierarchy because one of them is superior officer, and then it's
Yeah.
Rosie. But you get still this mutual respect and with Dandon and Mariel, there's no hierarchy there. They're a team, they're a duo, they're a pair, they're
Yeah.
partners, but they're friends is what they are, and it's only friends. And so I
Yeah.
think for me, watching through this, and actually, if I'm remembering correctly, the only sort of romantic interactions are actually it's mostly Tarquin pining for Rosie, and actually
Yeah.
they don't even like meet or get together until the end of the
I
book.
mean, they know each other before
Yeah,
this
but
and
as
stuff, but yeah.
in the actual story, they don't meet up
Yeah.
and anything. So it's one of the things I really appreciate. And I've been trying to find more books in general right now about friendship because obviously the romance genre is so prevalent and it's such a moneymaker in the West especially. And I mean
Mm.
also in lots of places in the East. Romance and
Romance
other
manga
things.
is like very also popular.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
and it sells. It's the thing that sells because
Mhm.
it's very emotional and reactive and it gets a reaction out of people.
Yeah.
And people chase those reactions. People chase those the feeling that these things give them essentially. And totally understand why. However, I think there's something we really miss when we don't have stories that are based out of friendship and have
Mm.
more stories based in friendship because man, yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts about this.
Yeah.
Um,
I know you do. We've talked about this before.
I know we have so much. But it's one of the reasons that Mariel of Redwall is so nostalgic for me is because
Yeah.
there is this beautiful picture of friendship between her and Dandon and Dury,
Yeah.
Tarquin, and even her and Rowan. You got me saying the wrong name. Ron Blade. That and then between Clary and Time and and Rosie.
Yeah.
And I just think it's really beautiful to watch these friendships and how cohesive they are, also between Dandon and Saxtus, and like the
Hmm.
deep love that they have for each other as
Yeah.
brothers and as like fellow orphans and abbey dwellers, and but also you have that like one's going off and doing the things and one just wants to stay at home. He doesn't want to go off. He doesn't want to travel.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. I think having that friendship where you have different paths in life, but you know that you really care for one another, and you can send the other off well while knowing that like this is a place to come back to.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the book, spoiler alert if you are planning on reading it, every creature who escaped Bladeger and traveled, who didn't go back to their homes or whatever, who
Yeah.
didn't go to Solomon Dastron, whatever, everybody's coming back to Redwall and they're shouting and it's all beautiful and you cry and everything happens. Abbot Bernard stood in front of the open gateway, paws tucked into wide habit sleeves. His voice quivered noticeably as he addressed the 4 travelers who stood with Lord Ronblade at the head of the army. You have come a very long way to be at Redwall Abbey.
Yeah.
Welcome home.
Hmm.
And it's a thing that I love about Brian is he always writes these really beautiful endings, and that one's not as I guess this one doesn't end as emotional as I suppose others are in the
Mm.
hospitality department at least. But it's the final chapter is an extract from the writings of Abbot Saxtus. So
Mm.
after a few seasons, Abbot Bernard is planning on retiring, and Saxtus, being the young wise man that he is, what? He does not die. No, he doesn't.
In between this and Bowmaker, he does.
Okay. I'm not talking about in between this and Bellmaker. Brianna, I'm talking about why Saxus becomes Abbot. Gosh dang it. Way to just ruin my vibe. Because old Abbot Bernard will just chuckle into his elderberry wine and recall that Simeon used to say that about him. He's still alive. When Abbot Saxtus is writing this excerpt at the end
Hmm.
of the book, Bernard is still alive. Okay.
Okay.
Sure, he dies in the next book.
Do you know what
Fine.
I love about Bowmaker?
What?
Is that Simeon is still alive.
I mean, somebody old had to be. And also, Simeon's touched by Martin. You know what I mean? He's got
Yeah,
a long life. Um,
apparently.
there's only one more thing that I want to discuss. Is there
Okay.
anything else that you want to discuss?
Not that I can think of.
Great. So there's a timeline issue that I have here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Gonf and Martin the Warrior, right?
Yes.
We've discussed this. We think there's about 400 or 500 years between the end of Mossflower and the beginning of Redwall, the books.
Yeah.
Lots of things can happen. I don't know how many generations that is in human lifetime, maybe 8 to 10 or something like that. I can't remember. I don't really know how we count generations, frankly. So I wrote a note and then had to edit my note later. So it says Dandon, he says my father's father was Gonf. And so I was like, oh, so his great grandfather, or he might have even said my father's father's father was Gonf or something. So from Mossflower to Mariel, only about 3 generations. Totally fine. But then I was thinking about it because later, I think it's Simeon was saying that Gonf's family lived in the old St. Ninian's church from Redwall, actually. So it's an Easter egg here.
Yeah.
For 6 generations before they moved back to the Abbey. And I was like, hold on a minute, what? So that means, so then I was like, okay, so father's father's father is just sort of a like, the biblical, like this person was the son of this person was the son. And it doesn't necessarily mean this person was actually like directly a descendant of. Sometimes it
Yeah.
does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think so I was thinking about that. Dandon is a descendant of Gonf, but not like a great grandson or whatever.
No, yeah.
Because in another book that we were also reading at the time, which we'll get to eventually, one of the characters from there is actually the granddaughter of Gonf. That actually, it's not just a couple of it's not several generations. It's directly daughter. So she's in between that. So between that book, anyway, it was a timeline thing that I find really challenging, especially when you have a hereditary or a bloodline essentially, and you have a character from that bloodline. That timelines are really fickle, and this is why what Star Wars always does
Oh,
is
yeah.
you have a timeline, and you're saying this is a rigid timeline,
Yeah.
and we're going to take these things and we're going to stick them in places, but we're going to stick them close enough that like there's plot holes and you have to sort of bend over backwards to fit things in.
Yeah.
And so I was worried this was going to be one of those things. But I think they got over them. Like I think Brian covered his tracks enough to say, you know, it's there was at least 6 generations before Gaunt's family returned to Redwall Abbey. Dandon could be the 6th or 7th or whatever generation. So maybe probably more like 7th generation or 8th generation. Lived at Redwall Abbey for a little while. So
I have this vague memory, and I feel like that's a book that's set after Redwall, of somebody who claims to be a descendant of Gomf showing up, but not attached to the Abbey and everything. I don't remember exactly, but I have this like vague memory. We'll see if we ever get to it, if I was wrong or not and stuff, but I don't know.
I don't know. So many questions. All right.
So many.
Brianna.
Kaytlyn.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
This is the first episode of 2025.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, we're not recording it in 2025, so this is
no.
a bit confusing. But
it is. I was like, where are we going with this?
Yeah. I'm tempted to stick this at the beginning of the episode. I'm not gonna lie to you.
You're my editor, so go for it.
Brianna, do you have any other thoughts about this book?
No, I don't.
We have a lot of thoughts about the next book, which we'll get to that next time. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Readers Clubhouse. If you like this discussion and you want to hear more, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify every other Friday. You can check our episode descriptions for the socials. Join us in the Clubhouse next time as we discuss the direct sequel to Mariel of Redwall, The Bellmaker by Brian Jacques. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Bye.